Hello, welcome to Series 4, Episode 7 of Psychotherapy Unfogged. As you know, I'm Mark Fielding, psychotherapist and relationship counsellor, and your host. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Keith Saggers, self-mastery facilitator and co-director of Seismic Jump. Keith has also worked as a TV creator and producer and has won awards for his children's animated TV series, The Flaming Thongs. He is the creator of Pathfinder Resurgence and facilitator of the Core System, a package of one-to-one and group life coaching and self-mastery performance programs, seminars, workshops, retreats, speeches, and Q&A sessions. I hope I got all that right, Keith.
Yes, it's quite a lot, isn't it?
You do a lot.
You covered it all. Thank you so much, Mark.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thanks a lot for coming on, Keith. This can be a really interesting interview. You bring so much to the table. I say that often, but it's always true. I mean, I always kick off the show, Keith, by just asking our guests just what personal experiences led you into the field, and obviously say as much or as little as you're happy with.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a little thumbnail on that one. It's very simple. As a 12-year-old boy, born and raised actually in a very small country town in Australia, quite small, 650 people, surrounded by, lots of farmland, a lot of wheat fields and horses and cattle and sheep. And I always had a very big interest in the geography of the area, which was quite isolated, but had a giant big hill in it, which I used to climb and get up on the top of the rocks and look down. And I used to look down at the little country town and go, I'm not defined by what I'm seeing, but I enjoy looking as part of the landscape. I enjoyed it very much. But I had the privilege, Mark, of then my father sending me to college in the city of Perth, quite some distance away, to live with my grandfather and grandmother. And my grandfather, perchance, happened to have been at the age of 14 a young pioneer drover, what they used to call an overlander, coming from Victoria all the way across the hinterland of Australia, including the Simpson Desert and obviously the harsh conditions of all that would have been like, and then making that journey across with 1,000 head of cattle. And how he got to the other side to Western Australia, well, quite frankly, it's a miracle. So he used to tell me the stories of that when I lived with him. So he just basically gave me a character study on resilience, fortitude, loyalty, honesty, and the spirit to the fighting spirit, as you might like to call it that way. So that's what started it, and I've never stopped since.
Yeah, and you talk a lot, on your LinkedIn kind of page about ascendancy, and that's really coming through even in what you've just said there. I mean, I guess I imagine you kind of looking down initially as a young child, and I'm thinking,
Yes.
connection with nature, and then with the droving, I mean, I guess so. So really, throughout your early life, I mean, you were kind of associated with things like internal resilience, nature, or all of
Yes.
these big feelings, really, these big,
Yes, big feelings.
personal characteristics. Yeah.
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 Courage and bravery as well. I guess that's sorry, just those two little
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. I mean, could you say a little bit more about that, Keith? Courage and bravery.
Yes, look, it's very interesting. I mean, bravery is an outcome, courage is the core attribute, I guess you could put it that way. Again, I go back to my grandfather. Like, I can remember one great story he told me when you were crossing the Nullarbor, where there were very few water holes and there were, very few creeks that were full, but they were basically facing what all the early pioneers that came out from the Europe, in particular Great Britain, faced when they got to Australia in the hinterland, and that was no water. So they called it the Great Perish, the Great Perish. And a
Yeah.
lot of people died, as you know, the history of Australia, died, going out and explorers. A lot of them died because they couldn't get the water. So I remember him telling me once, we had 1,000 head of cattle, Keith, and we were 2/3 of the way across. And we just got through the Sahara, the Nullarbor Desert, got to the Simpson, and he said, we knew there was a water creek. We knew there was a water creek because it had been sort of passed down by folklore. So they had 1,000 head of cattle, very thirsty, 25 horses, thirsty, about 15, 16 cattle dogs, all thirsty, and themselves of about 25 of them. Well, when they got there, it was empty.
Oh,
It was absolutely
yeah.
empty. And he said, for a brief moment, like it seemed as if all the the flies stopped flying and the birds stopped talking and the cattle stopped moving, and we all sort of like were frozen like statues, he said. And the realization was, well, you can't go back, but you've got to go forward.
Yeah.
And he said that moment of really basically courage within to say, we will do this. We will do this. And he did, and many times proved to be the case, was that what I would say forging character incidents take place in his life, remembering he was only 14. So by the time he got to tell me the stories and I took them on board, that's where courage, and then the bravery to follow up on your convictions. They say courage of your convictions, but you got to have bravery to act them out.
Yeah.
Look at what's going on in Ukraine, the bravery to act out the conviction that we will not be dominated by another country.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I guess if I link into, to your work now, really, I mean, there's so much overlap, isn't there? I mean, I just wonder, Keith, could you tell us a little bit about your programs and, just everything you bring to your, I mean, it's much more than just your work, isn't it? I mean, I'm calling it your work, but it's a kind of it's a vocation, isn't it? Really,
it's a vocation. There's a calling. I've had this calling all my life. I've always reached out to help people. And when I was a senior high school teacher, I ran a very special class which I created for the disadvantaged, at-risk kids in the school.
Yeah,
it was my curriculum, and that was based on know thyself, be thyself, see thyself, and which is, we've known that's been around for a long time. But I actually found a way to put that into technology terms and build a program around that. And that's what led me to where I am today. So over a period of since the age of 12 until now, coming into like the last quarter of my lifespan, and that's a true story. I've never given up wanting to ask why and how can I myself continue to have the self-awareness to improve, and then create a course. Now, what I've done, I have a new business partner. He's a young man of 23. His name is Matthew Caruana.
Oh,
he's a lovely young man.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We've interviewed him on the show.
Have you?
Had him on the show. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're now business partners. That's Seismic Jump is Matthew and I.
Yeah.
And that's based on the premise that there's only way is up and nothing's out of reach. And so, and he recently attempted the Guinness World Record in towel pull-ups to prove that nothing is out of reach, which is great.
I saw
that. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
A lot of people have. There's been a tremendous positive response, because this is actually all our aspirations and hopes and dreams. Instead of sitting idly at the back of our things, a wish list, we put it as a bucket list. You've got to action it. You've got to action it.
Yeah.
So we've created a very special priority course. We haven't yet launched it too much, but we're hinting at it all. And it's to do with mind, body, spirit as an integrated force field. Not as in rhetoric, because a lot of people are talking about the mind, the body, spirit, and that goes off into another aspect of, I guess you'd call it, some of the self-growth areas. But we're actually more involved in transformation. And we then operationalize the combined force field of mind, body, spirit through three key attributes, which everyone talks about, but very few people really know how to do it. And that is self-awareness meeting self-knowledge. So self-awareness derives and comes out into self-knowledge, which means then, so okay, you've had your self-awareness, I'm feeling cold, or I'm feeling hot, or I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling fearful, I'm feeling happy, or whatever. But then you've got to forge that into your self-knowledge and your values and your belief systems. And then out of those, you then get this combustion. And that combustion derives into what is the ultimate, that is self-mastery. Now, a lot of people have talked about self-mastery over the years, and we know it's been around a long time. And we know everyone's talking about self-awareness and mindfulness. We've gone way beyond that, way beyond that. And that's what our new program is being developed as. So this is a bit of a world first. I'm letting you know about it here, because we're about to do it. And then we've got another thing that we're doing, which all builds into everything you just talked about, Mark, is we're developing. We have a thought that hope is hopeless unless there's action. We've all got hopes and wishes and things, but it's left in the, oh, I hope this will happen, and I hope that'll happen, and I wish tomorrow. And so we've actually taken another re-look at the word hope and bringing it in some new energy and revitalizing it. And it's going to be an informing principle of our program, because people hope they're going to be a better performer tomorrow. They hope they're going to be a better husband, wife, or son, or daughter. Or so they hope they'll have a better job. But we are actually bringing a technology. And here's a core thing to it all, Mark. I think you find this appealing in technology that you're involved in there.
Yeah.
Is I held a course once. I was asked out of the blue quickly, could you come in and run a course for 2 hours with a group of high-tech wizards? They were in a very great big workshop, and I walked in there, and it was the second morning of this workshop they were in, and they were frazzled. And there was about 25 of them, I think, Mark, all sitting at long tables, all had laptops and desktops and mobile phones, and everything was there at their fingertips. And I looked at them, and they took one look at me, and they went, "Oh God, here's another guy coming to tell us what to do, about IT and everything." And I could feel this anxiety, and I could feel also this apprehension and also fatigue. And I went, "Well, I've got some really good news. I haven't come in to talk to you about IT at all. Is that okay with everyone?" Oh, all of a sudden there's a little smile here, there was a little smile there. And I said, "Can I ask you a question? Do you mind?" And they said, "No, no, please." I said, "Raise your hand if you believe you've got all the technologies that you need at your fingertips." And of course, it was like they all put their hands up because it was right in front of them. I said, "Good." Now, here's the really important question. How many of you, raise your hands, and there's no right and wrong answer. Raise your hands. How many of you have got the inner technology to make that technology and your lives work better? Not a single hand went up.
Fascinating question.
It is, isn't it? And
Yeah.
not a single question. And of course, now with the world we live in, it's become even more relevant, and it's a very important part of what I do. Because essentially what we're talking about is, using modern terms, of course, modern technology, human technology, or inner engineering, all these things, finding different ways to say what the ancients have been saying for years.
Yeah.
But really, that's the core of this. Now, think of it this way. People talk about they'll do mindfulness training, and then they'll do meditation, and they'll do this, and they're looking for that particular silver bullet they can do in, like anywhere between 5 minutes and 50 days in a cave. But
or longer.
Or longer, yes. I don't know, 30
Yeah.
years up in the mountains. And I don't mind. All roads lead to Rome if you know where that road needs to go. And if you know that it's not just to get peace of mind, and it's not just to get a sense of calmness, they're all good attributes. But if you actually know it's to know thyself, and people are now talking more and more, know thyself again. And a lot of people go, "Oh, that sounds great. I'll go and do this course, and I'll do that course, and I'll do this." And they go and do it, and they come out 5 days later, and they've forgotten the whole lot because it wasn't experiential.
Sure.
And you know yourself, Mark, from your background, if you don't actually really feel it, I mean, if you feel fear, you hold on to it too long, I will admit. But if you don't actually feel a little sense of resonance within you, that you have touched your core self, then the rest of it's just rhetoric to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I challenge people to do that, and I give them exercises to do. And then I'll say, "Have you felt it resonate to your true self, like a tuning fork?" And they go, "Oh my God, that's a good way to put it." "No, it didn't." "Well, let's try it again then." And then they do it. And it's only when you talk like this, Mark, and you give people these little guidelines, as you know, you're only, like you say, you take the horse to the trough to drink, but you can't make them drink.
No.
So all I want to do is be a guide and a facilitator to provide some resources external to them, which they can then play with and experience and then draw into themselves and forge their own inner resources, which will be resilience in particular.
Yeah.
Because, and a lot of things now, as we know, Mark, all the stats are coming out post the COVID now, with people going back to work and not wanting to go back, and the economic problems and supply. You must be getting a lot. I mean, this whole what I call hyper fatigue is in the ether. Hyper fatigue, hyper anxiety, hyper fear.
Yeah.
You wrap that up. We're not really equipped. We're not actually equipped to really look at that properly and deal with it. We're a bit like we should be looking at it more from the lens of what is the training that a special operative has to go through? What does they have to go through? Because they have to build resilience, calmness, cohesion within themselves. And they don't sit around and do a lot of mindfulness training. They do a lot of in the moment training, which brings mindfulness.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at when I kind of initially kind of looked at your LinkedIn page really. I guess the word transcendent. I mean, that was the word that kind of crossed my mind, and there's so much in what you've just said. I mean, the action part, just to pick up on that, so important. Yeah, because I guess hope is great. I mean, it's good to hope, but without action,
it's nothing.
It's kind of empty. Yeah, I mean, we can hope for things, of course, but taking action, and also the holistic nature of your program. And when you were talking about the mind, body, spirit, and intelligence, and the kind of force field, I mean, this might be the wrong terminology, but I think high state consciousness. It's very, very transcendent. You're looking for people to rise above their socially constructed self. I mean, I'm struggling to find the word really, but
yes, no, that's a really that's a perfect way of putting it. I think socially constructed. I mean, we are, as we know, our mind is actually really just a repository of memories.
Yeah.
And things like, without those, you'd have no mind. We wouldn't be knowing how to think. So we know our mind is actually just a giant like library, a repository of all sorts of knowledge and things and beliefs and that, but it's not actually it's not something that you should say, well, I am my mind. You're not your mind. Your mind is itself.
Yeah, so
and
true.
People say that, oh, I'm out of my mind and I'm this. And they say, well, hold on. I always say this is a little thing, you might find this a bit funny, but I say to people, can you just for a moment, just supposing your mind was a library and we took it and we put it over on the table. So your mind, which is on the table now. Yep. Okay. Have you done that? Yeah, I've done that. And just think that your body is just a repository of all the foods and fluids you've taken to your body. So it's just a mountain of, like nutrient. Put that over next to the mind. Have you done that? Yeah. Now tell me what's left.
Oh, that's fascinating. What do people say?
They go, they actually stop. They get goosebumps. They go, oh my God, I've got some space for the first time. I said, that space that you're feeling now is actually the space of heightened consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the space that, and then of course, look, the Eastern mystics have talked about the Eastern, the Indians had guru and everyone, and all the way through to Joe Dispenza and all these people talking. It's that space between this consciousness. And then we talk about, as you know, Mike, we talk about metacognition. A lot of people don't actually think about what they're thinking. They don't.
True.
And if they were to do a bit more like that, they'd be very mindful. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's I use mindfulness in my practice. I mean, I meditate. Mindfulness has literally changed my life. And when you talk about metacognition, I think, I mean, if you're sitting in a position of metacognition and watching your thoughts, then you have it's a higher state of consciousness, isn't it? And believing your thought. We can't believe our thoughts, can we? Our thoughts can say all sorts of things.
Yes, absolutely. And because it's constructed within the ego, and that's a bit of a rabbit hole. But picking up on the word transcendent, which is it's similar to our ascendancy intelligence. We just work on the premise that everything wants to grow, even the weeds in the grass. Everything, the little stunted animals, everything wants to continue to grow.
So true.
And I was with a client one day, Mark, and we're looking out a window and there's this magnificent set of trees. One was really huge. And I said to the client, I said, do you see that giant tree out there, how tall it is? And they said, yeah. I said, remembering that began under the ground and then grew up through the ground. And they said, yep, wondering where I was going with it. And I said, well, did at any time did the tree stop and say, you know what, I've grown halfway, I don't need to go any further? I said, it kept going, didn't it? I said, well, so why do human beings say, hey, I've gone as far as I want, and now I'm going to retire. But growth actually has a natural lifespan.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess this is what your program is all about. It's facilitating, the natural propensity that we all have in us, which is, society kind of pushes down, unfortunately, of just growing, really, of just growing. Developing high consciousness, more awareness. Your program facilitates that in others, really. It helps.
Correct, it does. And that one of the words that ascendancy comes into transcendence is that it's a bit like Abraham Maslow said, actually, just not long before he died. He didn't publish it, but he had the theory of Z, which was, basically this, that he actually said there was another level above self-actualization. And he said it's actually transcendence
Okay.
of consciousness, as you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
A lot of people I've mentioned to, and they look at me with like bemusement. And they said, oh, I thought he just, and I said, he didn't create the pyramid at all. He had this sense of hierarchy, but people got hold of it, made a graphic and made a pyramid, and it's magical, and it's just,
Yeah.
I love that.
It's
But
everywhere, isn't it? Yeah, it's
it's
useful.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And he was annoyed. Apparently, he
Yeah.
writes, I'm so annoyed. I don't know who did that. I wish they had never done. But coming back to what you're saying is I work on the premises that if growth is your natural inherent blueprint, which is
Yeah.
part of the survival of the species, right? The species doesn't survive if it doesn't at least have some expansion and some growth, does it?
Yeah.
Which means basically, and we do tend to think of growth as an ascendancy, and we do think it as a
Yeah.
a vertical growth of some description, and we see it in the plants, we see it in animals, we see it in
Yeah.
ourselves. So when you stop all of that through self-sabotaging, you can blame others. There's always that. People are doing it more than they realize. And so today we've got a negative frequency running around the world of people going, well, someone else is to blame for this and someone else is to blame for that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's only up to you to have an enjoyable life if you choose to have it, even in the worst of situations, as they are proving now in Ukraine. So, well, in a nutshell, mate, that's what the whole thing's about is take up the challenge, do it
Yeah.
yourself. It's a do it yourself process. And we just provide the tools and help and the assistance and facilitation to take you really basically inward,
Yeah.
where you do all the work yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And and the work, yeah, I mean, I guess you're working with the individuals, but I mean the personal opinion,
Yes.
but arguably, I think humanity really needs to raise its levels of, it needs to ascend, doesn't it, in order to save the planet. I mean, that's the most important
Yes.
thing. But yeah, and also just going back to Matt, I mean, he's such an inspirational kind of person. I mean, and I guess you both live it really. I mean, through your lives, you've both kind of lived it. I'm kind of moving around a little bit. I wanted to
Okay.
ask about your experience with martial arts. I mean, you used to struggling to read my notes, but you used to be the proprietor of an inner city Sistema Russian martial arts school. And of course, that links into what we're talking about. I wonder whether you
Yes.
could say a bit more
Yeah.
about that and kind of how it links into your
Yeah.
life now and your program.
Well, I have to say it's a very important part of it because
Yeah.
the whole thing of Sistema, which whilst it is a martial art, it's based on the four pillars. So it's actually a health system. Ironically, it's not designed to go out and beat people up like karate or
Yeah.
boxing or any of those. So it's made up of the four pillars of life. That is breathing, relaxation, posture, and movement.
Yeah.
Now, those four things, most people don't know how to breathe properly, as you know. They don't breathe from the diaphragm.
No, no.
So there's a problem. So they're walking around with too much excess tension. They're not relaxed unless they're doing their meditation or mindfulness or on holiday, but they're generally, most of the year, they're in basically, as I say, in excess tension mode.
Yeah.
Their posture reflects those previous two, and their movement is actually very fragile. It's very fragile unless you're sports orientated. So what Sistema is about know thyself. So adjudicate those four things in yourself. Like at any minute in time, you can say, am I breathing from my diaphragm? Am I relaxed? Am I breathing, or have I got tension in my right shoulder, or etc. Am I actually positioned form wise to take advantage of my body, like and thirdly, which is movement with good balance.
Yeah.
So if you can take those things and bring them into a martial art, and then learn how to go into high performance stages, when you go into, we might call it in the old days, flow state or zone, but
Yeah.
it's something, it's a little bit like that, but a little bit more.
Mm.
And when you're in that state, when you're encountering a conflict, whether it be a physical conflict or a verbal conflict or a work conflict, no matter what, you are in such a state of self-mastery and self-control through your self-authenticity
Yeah.
that you can go, I don't need to engage in fear on this one. I don't need to bring any anxiety. I don't need to bring any panic. I'll just be me. And of course, it's quite chilling to an opponent. I've seen it in training and I've in real life situation where I had to encounter it once, and an assailant who was like extremely angry and was terrible. He was beating up his wife and goodness. But I just simply said to him, you really have to stop this. in the manner that I've spoken to you, not like in gruff and not alpha male mode.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like he's a bit stunned first off at my tone of voice.
Mm.
He said, "Well, what the effing business is this of yours?" I said, "Well, it really isn't, and you're right to say that to me. However, I can't allow you to continue what you're doing, and that is, beating up a woman." And he went, he got all bravado.
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm gonna do this." I said, "Okay, well, I've got one question for you now." He's looking at me. So I waited and I paused and I said, "Are you absolutely certain this is what you want to happen?" And now he read between the lines like,
Mm.
"Oh, okay." He just looked at my face, which was like I'm talking to you. And I said it like I'm talking to you, Mark.
Yeah.
For about 15 seconds, he froze and it just registered in his mind, well, this guy's way too calm. Like, who is he? Is he, what is he? What is he? How could he be
Yeah.
talking to me like this?
Yeah.
And he's obviously used to getting away with being a very aggressive person.
Mm.
He turned around and walked about, I guess about 15 feet away, turned around and tried to rev it up again. I said, "I've still got the question for you." He ran. He ran. So I'm not showing any bravado. Just describing like through a calm demeanor
Yeah.
of feeling nothing other than, look, I feel sorry for you because you obviously got some problems,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
asking
Definitely.
you, are you sure you want to do this? Because whatever happens now, this
Mm.
will be on you.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess I look at kind of where you are in that example, and I think, yeah, it's almost like, I think it's almost counterintuitive. I mean, there's you're grounded in your authentic self, but there's also a transcendent part, isn't there?
Yes,
That
yes,
there's quite a lot going on, and that
yeah,
again, I guess links to the mind, body, spirit, the integrated field.
yeah,
It's
it
very
does.
holistic, isn't it? Which I
Yeah,
love.
and you
I love that
and you've
approach.
got to, and you must activate the three: the mind, the body, the
Yeah,
spirit. Like a lot of people will activate the mind, which is the worst thing to do because that's where the three brains are.
yeah. The mind is
Because
troublesome. Yeah,
yeah, and the
yeah,
body thinks it can do things maybe it can't carry out, But anyway,
yeah.
that's where this guy was. He was locked in those two, but he had no spirit, and I was full of
Mm,
spirit. And
mm.
that's where, look, people can move anything with spirit, as you know, not in the terms of religious sense, but we talk about the fighting spirit, the Australia. We talk about the Anzac spirit. That's just simply the spirit that says, lift you up out of the trenches and run forward.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, it's again transcendent, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
raising people above, their core kind of socially constructed self. I mean, I also wanted to. I'll ask you this. I know when we initially met and for chat before the interview, I wanted to ask you to say a bit more about dynamic mindfulness because that was a
Mm.
concept I'd never come across. Really liked
Yes.
it. I mean, could you perhaps
Yeah.
say a bit more about
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And so I guess perhaps looking at it this way, I know that mindfulness is about being aware, and there's lots of examples, and you teach it, and that is you can be sitting there and notice the breath going in, and notice this, and notice the texture of the wind on your skin, and all of those kind of awareness protocols
Mm,
um, and modalities that come with all of that. And that's true to a degree, but there's a thing called dynamic mindfulness, which is not new to me. It's part of what we do in Systema. It's
mm,
also very much starting to get a hold in America now. And that
mm.
is this: when the clue to it is this, Mark, when you look at kids playing, like without realizing they're being watched or they're playing football or
Yeah.
whatever it is, have you noticed how they are actually in a state of awareness because they're very aware,
Yeah.
but they're playing in that awareness.
Yeah. True.
And
Yeah.
and that has always struck with me as a kid. Whenever I was playing sport or wrestling and all that, I always found that I was in this altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And it was only because when I was doing movement that I was in that, Mark. You know,
Mm.
now people can get into it. I know through meditation and being very still, and being very very still is a bit different to really understand the yogic understanding, as you know, with mindfulness and meditation. That is unity of one, and that's what I get when I'm in a mindful, dynamic, mindful position. Like when I'm running somewhere or I'm playing a sport
Mm.
or doing a martial art, I'm in an absolute, almost hypnotic trance, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that only comes out of, like, I know and this goes back to my granddad. When he was on the horseback, like they're all, God, it was chaos out there and amongst all the dust and the flies and everything. And he said, Keith, you get to learn a lot about yourself and where you're at when you're on the back of a horse and there's cattle going this way and there's dogs over here and people cracking whips.
Yeah.
He said, but you know what? You get so used to all of that around you because you're focused on being as one with the horse, and the horse is one with the earth.
Yeah.
And so from ground to horse to you're in a vertical kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And you feel as if the horse is moving almost in a spirit sense across the ground. Now, I can recall that being told to me, and I'm a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
You would think a 12-year-old boy would go, that's a lot of, that's just not, I don't know what you mean, Granddad. But I knew instinctively what he was talking about.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I have experienced it constantly and constantly and constantly when I'm with people. And there might be some sort of chaos going on, Mark, and people go,
Yeah.
they'll look at me and they go, what's going on for you? Because you don't seem to be engaged in all of this.
Yeah.
But you're engaged in it, but you're not engaged in it. And I said, well, um, it's a little bit like if you don't have that space where the mind and the body are overhead, you don't find where that space is. This hyperspace we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
then you will get caught up in the minutiae of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I absolutely. I mean, that's a really, really beautiful kind of demonstration of, I don't know, the kind of, I get transcendent. I mean, it's so difficult to put this stuff into words, isn't it? And I think I have a, when you're kind of talking about it and what your grandfather said and his experience, I think I have a real inner understanding of that. But then trying to put that into words, which I guess you've had to do for your program, isn't it? It's quite difficult to put this stuff into words because we feel it.
Well,
yeah.
Yes, and that's the clue. It is experiential. So even when I'm
Yeah.
describing it to you and you're taking it on cognitively, as you
Yeah.
are, and maybe having some resonance and feeling with it,
Yeah.
unless we were together and you were doing part of the exercise I was giving you,
Yeah.
you really, and that's why I'm against people running all these methodologies. And, I'm nothing against it all. Everyone's got a different way of going about it. But only when you're with a person, only when you're with a human being, another human being, can you really grasp it? And that's the whole essence of great teachers going off to see gurus. You have to be there to experience it.
Yeah.
And I know it's been very convenient to have all those technologies like you and I have got today,
Yeah.
but I still think we've got to be careful we don't usurp all of that with just the technology. Because there's something about, if you want to teach someone how to really play tennis or golf or wrestling or boxing, you really can't just do it through the screen. You've got to actually be there to calibrate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to kind of use, I guess you take, I mean, I work a lot on Zoom, and Zoom is fine. I think Zoom is good for therapy. But I guess if you're learning something, if you're sitting with a guru, it's more than just a spoken word, isn't it? I mean, it's the energy feel, there's a lot more going on, unconscious communication, all of that. I mean, moving around just a little bit, I know we're running out of time, but I have to ask you about the flaming thongs. Yeah, I mean, our listeners will be really interested to hear more about that. Is it okay just to ask a bit more?
Oh, sure. Look, absolutely. Well, it's ironic because a friend of mine, I was in Western Australia and he had an art gallery and I was doing some filming and we met up. And we went out, we went to a barbecue after a period of time saying hi to each other. And he was talking to me, how was it I got into being a TV producer of children's programs at Channel 7 in Western Australia, which was the #1 station in Australia, the most profitable. And I said, I fell into it as a researcher, and then I got asked to take them out. I got thrown in the deep end. He said, so what did you, well, I said, I was sort of the producer of Fat Cat, who was at that time the biggest national costume suit character. And then the boss would come down and say, Keith, now we want you to create another new show for Fat Cat. And I said, well, what about Zippity Doodah as an idea? And he said, good. Now we've got Percy Penguin. So you've got him as his cohort, which is already built, but you need to create some new characters. So I went down to the giant warehouse and I found some green cloth and I turned over something that looked like a turtle. So I created Thomas Turtle. And then Tristan Jones said to me, my partner, he said at the time, he said, to become my business partner, he said, so if we were going to create a TV series for children, how would we go about it? And I said, well, see those thongs that you've been wearing on your feet, because it's the middle of summer? He said, yeah. I said, look, I picked the thongs up and I said, look, you look at the shape of a thong, it almost could be the shape of a person with the two bands that come out could be their arms. He said, oh, I love that idea. Why don't we do that now? That night, we created a fictional family called the Flamin' Thongs. They were called the Thongs and they wore thongs.
Yeah.
And we created the father, the mother, the son, the daughter. One of their favorite characters was going to be a cane toad called Rurp. And we wrote it down on a napkin. And then 6 months later, we raised about $800,000 and we came to Sydney to try and get off the ground. And 2 years later, we raised 4 million and it got made and won awards.
Yeah, I noticed that it won awards. I mean, what a fantastic
Yeah.
project. And
Yeah.
I guess it just grew fairly intuitively, really.
Well, it's again, it's ironically how it springboards from my grandfather again, because the story of the Aussie battler. So the story about the Thong family, the five of them, live in a little seaside village where there's no tourists come. There's never any money there, and the father appoints himself as the mayor of the town. So they create a giant thong and put it in the middle of the town square to create some sort of buzz. But they were always, and the son Holden was always inventing things, but they always going to blow them up. So they're an endangered species, but somehow, as you always know with drama, you find a way that they solve the problem. So the family were very loving, very respectful, but always fighting amongst themselves, but also finding ways to survive. So it was really me living out my childhood in a small country town, which I did.
Yeah, I mean, goodness, fantastic. I mean, if people want to, I mean, if people in UK and people in Australia want to see it, is it still available?
Well, it's available actually. We just look. It's been running a long time now. We just renewed it again. The ABC in Australia, which is the national broadcaster, as you know,
Yeah,
they run it regularly. They keep repeating it on the children's channel called ME. So channel ABC Australia runs on their children's channel called Me, and they run it periodically. So they'll run it. There's 26 episodes, and you can find some of them on YouTube, and they basically will be repeating it like 4 or 5 times a year. There's 26 episodes, and they strip run it, and so it's going to be around for another 2 years minimum till the end of 2024.
oh, fantastic. Oh, well, thanks for talking about it. Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated to hear more about it. We've run out of time, but I want to
Sure.
the last question I always ask our guests is, what are your go-to coping strategies for sustaining good mental health? I'm probably guessing there's more than one. Um, what do you do every day, Keith, to sustain your mental health?
Well, I guess there's a number of little things. First off, is I'm on a constant journey of self evolution. That's what I do every morning. So if you start your day going, well, today I'm going to evolve a little more,
Yeah,
and today I'm going to learn a little more, there's the first beginning foundationals. That's your foundational. Because
yeah,
if you don't wake up with that mindset, the rest of it's just a hollow stack of cards. Okay. And then out of that, then I'll go, well, now I've scheduled myself. I'm going to have a 45 minutes to do some body weight training at home in functional fitness.
yeah, yeah.
And then I'll finish that off with this is generally every morning. And then I have I call a protein smoothie, which is a smoothie and a NutriBullet. And I put in a cupful of frozen berries, frozen banana, one full banana, half a full cup of walnuts, a full cup of almonds, a big spoonful of green, what they call green powder, which is all the vegetables made into a powder,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and then in goes two two teaspoons then of protein powder, and that's how I start my day. This is all part though of respecting the fact that I've got to find that space. I look for the space between myself and what's going on around here. So when I'm moving through it, I'm not a reactive person. I'm proactively moving through space.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't do. They don't have that. And look, may I say, this has taken years to get to here. This isn't the silver bullet. I mean, I had to really, really
Yeah,
apply myself to this, Mark.
yeah.
But self-awareness has got to be leading into self-knowledge. And those have got to be basically the end result is self-mastery over yourself, but action through um, what I've just been telling you, and that is my own sense of sensibility of life and appreciation of life. But life is never always easy, and it's always full of challenges. But every one of those, without it being a cliche, every moment you have a difficulty, think of it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
So difficulty is an opportunity in reverse, upside down.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm resonating with everything you're saying. I mean, we'll kind of finish the interview there,
Yes.
Keith. I mean, I just wanted to say I'm so glad I got to interview you. I mean, it's really inspirational. I mean, I feel really, really inspired after talking to you. You know, and I really urge our listeners to check out your program. It's a very, very inspirational, you know, and also practical program, which, you know, so yeah, really, really interesting.
It's very practical.
Yeah.
It's really it's got to be pragmatic, it's got to be
Yeah.
practical, and you've got to be able to apply it. Otherwise, it's rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So thank you so much for coming
All
on,
right.
Keith. Good to meet you.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.